This week on Head to Head, we've assembled two of the most powerful hot hatches on the segment, the 270 pound-foot of torque Ford Focus ST and the 280 pound-foot of torque Mazda Speed 3. Now, beyond both being hatchbacks, they both have a ton of cargo room, seating for 5, they're both the color red, they both make funny faces, but the question is, which one's better? Because we're going to take these two to a racetrack at the end of the video, just you wait. Let's talk about how they work as cars on a road when you're not driving them at the limit. As for interior design, I think that has to go to the Ford. This Mazda is not bad, but the design of it looks like it's been the recipient of a couple modifications throughout its lifespan in order to get the navigation screen to work right, for example. It was there, now it's here. Now we have all these displays telling us different things, and there's just a lot of stuff going on here. This does feel like a more open cabin, like there's more space, although I think the Ford has more interior volume. Now as for steering feel, pedal feel, transmission feel, this shifter you have to be a little bit more gingerly with than the Fords. It takes some deliberate movement, not extremely deliberate, but compared to the Ford, it's noticeable. It's interesting because these seats, they don't look as racy as the Fords, but they do just as good of a job of holding you in place, not squeezing you, bear hugging you like the Fords do, which I like, but these work just as well without looking the part. The sound of this car is more traditional turbocharged four-cylinder. It has a drone to it. It has this sort of, I wouldn't say exactly a nice quality sound, but it lets you know about its aggression, how much power it has. I certainly prefer the Ford's induction noise versus this. Overall though, this Mazda Speed 3 has a rawness to it, a more project car-like feel to it. The Ford feels more flexible. It delivers more power earlier, and though it does stumble at red line like the Mazda, it seems to be a little bit later. The way its power comes in is a bit more smoother. It feels more controllable. This just feels sort of savage, bonkers, and crazy. Again, more immature. Versus the Mazda Speed, I like the Ford's overall interior design more. Not the look of it, but the coherentness of it. Now, these cars are similar in many ways. They're both hatchbacks, they're both red, they both have lots of power and so on, but they differ kind of greatly with the design. The Mazda looks like this, and the Ford looks like this. The Mazda is a little rough around the edges, and it's enjoyable for those reasons, but I'm not sure if that enjoyment weighs out the fun that I have driving this. This is just so much better balanced. Its power delivery feels more controllable, more linear, and to me it's more enjoyable as a car instead of sort of something silly that you play with. The big thing you notice immediately after driving the Mazda and jumping in the Ford is the steering. The Mazda has a bit more of a hydraulic sensation through the wheel, while the Ford doesn't. The Ford's wheel feels a lot quicker. There's a fewer turns lock to lock. This thing comes off center really quickly, but it's precise and controlled. It comes off in a very easy to use manner. And then there's that induction note. I've gone on a lot about how wonderful this thing sounds on the throttle through that sound tube that they're using to amplify the intake's noise. It is wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. Now, some on our staff complain that it's a fake sound. It's a real sound. It's just amplified. To help sort out which was the better daily driver, we decided to have a torque steer test. The rules are simple. With traction control off, accelerate for as long as possible without touching the steering wheel. Whichever car goes the longest wins. This car has a limited slip differential, and it's pulling boost in first and second gear to limit torque steer. Let's see how well it works. First gear's engaged, wide open throttle. Oh, Jesus! The Mazda loses the Torkster competition. Haven't even driven the Ford yet, it loses. Now the Ford. Ford's using its brakes to help deal with torque steer because we don't have a limited slip differential. Let's see how well it works. First gear, engage, flat on the throttle, and we're in the dirt. So just barely into second gear. Just barely into second gear. With the action on the road settled, we met with Randy Popst at Streets of Willow Raceway to find out which car was faster. After our lapping sessions, the Mazda Speed 3's best time was 1 minute 29.51 seconds. The Focus was over a second faster with a 1 minute 28.4 second lap. All right, Randy, we both lapped these cars. What do you think about the Mazda Speed 3?
Well, in this group, it surely feels well built to me, and it just feels the way we normally think of, say, a BMW or a Mercedes feeling solid, like a vault, compared to the Subaru and the Focus ST.
Yeah, and you were saying that might be the dampers. Nice feeling there, right?
I really like the shocks. The Mazda Speed 3 has more shock damping, especially more rebound damping.
Now, the understeer is pretty prevalent.
The understeer is the overriding feature of the car's handling characteristics. It's like always there.
It's so noticeable in contrast to the ST, which just has this beautiful balance, just steps out so easily and offers so much control, and then you hop in this and you're like...
What it offers is control options, whereas the Mazda, we don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
But now through this kink, that's a 100-mile-an-hour kink, the good shocks and the strong body structure does give a better sense of control, I think.
Okay.
But we get into the S's like we're driving right now.
Yeah.
Here, watch me attack this corner. When we turn in,
And
whoa, it's like, honey, turn. Just about put it in the dirt.
Almost.
Because of the understeer. The Mazda does not reward aggression on entry.
And there's an interesting behavior too when you're on throttle. Sometimes you're not getting what you feel like you're asking for. Like it's varying. Like you're asking for this, it's giving you something else.
Usually less.
Yes, and it seems to vary. It happens in between shifts. It sometimes happens mid-corner when you start asking for like 100% throttle, and it's like dialing it in slowly. And the crazy thing is, this thing makes more torque than the Focus. But you know how much torque?
No.
10 pound-feet.
Oh.
It makes 10 pound-feet more than the Focus. And yet this feels so much more powerful.
Well, to me, it feels like a better made car, more solid, better shocks, but numbing understeer that actually detracts from the driving experience, especially on the track.
Focus ST. Randy, I know you're a big fan of this car. I'm a big fan of this car.
And that's why.
And that's why.
Right there. Look at that tail work.
That is so much fun. To have a front-wheel drive car that just sort of steps out, and you don't even have to countersteer. Right there, you're getting a little bit of movement from the tail. It's just beautiful.
You're really better off not countersteering. All you have to do is add a little bit of power.
Exactly.
Just a little squeeze.
And it snaps it right back in line. And I have no idea exactly how they're doing it. I have some suspicions. I know a few other people have suspicions too. But it's a wonderful thing.
I want to meet the Ford engineers that developed this suspension setup.
I think this car has changed the game, basically, of how a front-wheel drive car should behave. And like this, I think, is the ideal behavior of a front drive car. A really loose tail, not a lot of perceivable understeer. And so that way you can set up corners so nicely.
Drift it here, Carlos. Yeah! That's it.
It's beautiful.
Look at that balance. You can just...
It's so
rear,
easy. You just
front,
throw it
rear,
in.
Front.
And it's inviting. You can do it everywhere. I love it.
Never driven a front-wheel drive car that handles like that. It's kind of a predictable feeling.
It's so predictable.
It's not snappy
not worrying
or
at all.
scary. You have control of that.
Exactly. Power delivery is really nice. You have a decent amount of power being delivered to those wheels, but it doesn't feel overwhelming like it can at times in the Mazda.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel this is a lot linear in its delivery. It's not as smack you in the face, now we're accelerating. It seems to be more progressive, smoother.
I like the sound the car makes.
Oh, I love that
It's
sound.
got a kind of an aggressive engine note. It's not an exhaust note. I think it's intake noise.
It's an intake noise. They've got a resonator on the airbox that's amplifying those low frequencies, and it's variable, so it does it only at the right throttle position at the right speed. So it's never droning on the freeway, but whenever you get on the throttle, when you downshift to pass somebody, you get this wonderful whoa sound. If I'm at Chrysler and I'm building the new SRT Dart, I need to drive one of these.
Well, you know those guys all go to dinner in the same restaurants in Detroit.
They better be driving one of these.
That would be good in my book.
If Honda's developing a new Civic Si, they better be driving one of these. You know, this is like set the bar for front-wheel drive sport compact cars. The Mazda Speed 3 packs one monster of an engine, and it's sure to put a smile on your face every time you dip into the boost. The winner of this week's head-to-head, though, is the Ford Focus ST, for its chassis balance, its performance at the racetrack, and its coherent, drivable, and fun package on the road.